What's up, guys? It's Friday night. It's time to bitch, and tonight we're bitching about tech support. If you're a Diag guy, you're doing tech support whether you know it or not. You're supporting your colleagues, you're supporting your coworkers, front of house staff, supporting everyone in a technical sense because generally you're the guy with the answers. Right? That's what we do. That's, as a Diag guy, that's what I do. I also provide some remote tech support. I don't do it a whole lot. I don't necessarily want to be mainstream in that because I have lots of other stuff to do. But if I can help with a problem, I'm generally pretty willing to do so, and I enjoy the challenge. The most important part of being an effective diagnostician, you have to understand the problem. You have to listen to the symptom, listen to the stated complaint. If you have to call the client and understand what the problem is in their own words, that can be really valuable. It also gives you the opportunity to ask questions that may not have been asked on the front counter, questions they may not have known needed to be asked. It's not a front counter fault. Sometimes it is, but most of the time we know more about what we're dealing with. If we've duplicated, there's nothing wrong with calling to confirm the right thing. If you have a vibration, a break pulsation, and a misfire, and the complaint's of vibration or shaking, which one? You have to understand that. You have to be able to actually troubleshoot. You have to be able to start at the basics and work your way up. Sometimes you can resolve 20 different lights with a fuse. Now we have to figure out why the fuse blew. After you unplug the 74 port power adapter plugged into the rear power point with 3 refrigerators running off of it, you can usually figure it out. But you have to understand, you have to take the time to listen to the problem and understand it. So I had a tech support call yesterday. I had to call support doing a solenoid strategy on a Ford, solenoid body strategy and IDN on a reman transmission. I was getting an error that I've never seen in IDS before unless I fat fingered a number. Invalid strategy ID. I verified it. I put it in correctly, and it was giving me an error. So I didn't have great wireless service, so I jumped onto Oasis to download the TRID, put the number in there, and it came back as invalid. So at that point, I called tech support. Immediate response, well, yeah, no, IDS has been having problems. It's an IDS problem, so yeah, you just need to delete IDS, reinstall it, make sure it's updated, delete all your sessions, and give it about a half hour, and then try again. Okay, that doesn't make a lot of sense, but we'll play ball. So what can you tell me about why the TRID is being kicked out as invalid on Oasis? Immediate response, no, it's an IDS problem. It has nothing to do with Oasis. So anybody who's used Ford's Oasis PTS, if you're putting a TRID solenoid body strategy ID in to download a TRID file, that's your solenoid body strategy for manual upload. If it's coming up invalid on there, it has nothing to do with Oasis. That is an identification problem. That is a strategy ID that is incorrect. There were 4 phone calls placed on this to help the guy understand that I have a little bit of familiarity with Ford. I've worked on 1 or 2. This is not an IDS problem. This is an ID problem. The ID is incorrect. Can you please verify the ID that you guys have in the system to make sure that the right one is present on the sheet? The response to that was, yeah, no, the ID you have is right. There's no way they would get that wrong. Right. So it was wrong. The wrong ID was on the paperwork we were given. The right ID is thankfully on the main control. I know some of those main controls went out with no labels on them. So I'm going to drive out to resolve that hopefully on Monday. That was really frustrating for me, not because the wrong ID was on. It was because he was totally ignoring what I was saying. My guess is probably because he didn't understand it. But the approach that there's no way we made a mistake, damn, that's a really cocky thing to say, and that's a really shitty way to approach something with a client. When I take a remote service call, and I don't do it a lot, but I've done it a few times, I have to assume there is a certain set of skills present. I generally start very basic, but I'm always going to assume there is a certain skill level present of testing that I can talk them through it. I do it with my techs all the time. It's easier in the shop because I can watch and make sure they're doing it correctly. And if I need to kick them, if I need to correct them, not kick them, kicking's only on Fridays after lunch. If I need to correct something, I can. I can walk them through it and make sure. FaceTime's a great tool for that. If somebody's setting something up and the result doesn't make sense, I will absolutely ask them to FaceTime me and show me how they're connected, where they're connected, what they're connected with, all that kind of stuff. But I have to understand the problem. I have to understand the methods that are being used. You've got to be able to research and develop some subject knowledge or have some subject knowledge. If you don't understand what you're working on or what you're troubleshooting, you're probably not going to be very effective. I think that's something that a lot of us will get maybe a little cocky about and lose a little bit of humility. When you deal with a system for X amount of years, whatever it is, and it hasn't changed, and then they make a change and you make an assumption that it still operates the same, you're probably going to make a bad decision and you're probably going to have a bad time. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. I don't like those t-shirts, so I don't do that real often. It does happen. I'm not going to say it doesn't. I've gone 3-4 hours into a diag to find out I missed a blown fuse. And I know that's been mentioned once or twice in a certain podcast. I was not prepared for the fact that somebody had wrapped a bunch of wire around the lower legs of the fuse and stuffed it back in the hole. I've seen a lot in my time in the industry. That was a first for me. So I don't argue when I'm told to check something thoroughly anymore. I just check it. And that doesn't happen real often. You know, we make a lot of jokes about it, but it's not a real common thing. I tend to be pretty thorough. I don't like going back looking like a moron. Occasionally it can be entertaining, but I don't like looking like an idiot. Let's call it for what it is. You know, a lot of the mistakes we make, we're rushing, we're prejudging, we're making assumptions. You absolutely can't do that. You have to keep an open mind. You have to think outside the box sometimes, but you have to remain open-minded and you have to listen and understand the problem. Whether you're doing remote tech support on site, support on demand, you know, support on demand is a whole nother ball of wax. They also have to assume there is a certain skill level of the guy who's doing what they're telling them to do. And if they don't possess the skill level, or they're not willing to listen, or they're just going to yes you to death, if we're into the car, we're not stupid. We can see what you're doing, what you're missing, what you're not. We have to take you at your word, but it's only going to cost you time. And generally when we're doing support on demand or remote support, you're paying for our time. If you lie to us, just like a client, if you BS us about what you did or didn't do, you're the one who's going to pay for it. It really isn't any sweat off our back. It's frustrating. Our whole purpose is to help. It's not to belittle you. We're there to help you. As any form of tech support, we're there to help solve problems, but we can't do that with inaccurate info. We can't do that with half the info. Even if you made a stupid mistake, just own up to it so we can move past it. If we're hung up on a broken connector that you missed initially and then you found it but don't want to say anything because you're too proud to admit you missed something, you're only costing everyone time. You're costing yourself money. And you're creating a bad experience potentially for a client. You know, when you have a misfire and you have a dead driver in the ECU, but you didn't check it, or a bad connection, even worse. You have one pin pushed out of a main junction connector that's causing a misfire, and you missed it. Okay, you missed it. Fix it and move on. Retension it. Replace the pins. Replace terminals. Replace connector. Whatever you got to do, but fix it. But if you go down a path and never close the door, never, ever, ever close the door on yourself. You know, everything, replace and retest. Even if you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that's going to fix the problem, you never close the door. There can always be something that you don't see, or something that you have to fix one problem to get to another problem. That is becoming more and more common with the level of complexity that's increasing. The other big thing that I would say is really important as a diag tech, and I am terrible at it. You cannot beat yourself up about mistakes. Mistakes are learning experiences. That is how we grow. If you make the same mistake frequently, then you got to change something. But we're allowed to make mistakes. We're not perfect. These systems are extremely complex. There are going to be times where you're going to miss something. You're going to miss something really stupid and really obvious because we're generally not looking at stupid and obvious. I don't get a lot of vibrations. I don't get a lot of noise concerns. Most of what I deal with is drivability. I am embarrassed to admit it, but I missed something really stupid on a vehicle, and I miscalled it. I don't like to admit it, but I'm willing to admit it when I make a mistake. I am not happy about it, but I am not going to pass the buck. I'm going to own it. I'm going to own it, and I'm going to remember it, and I'm going to learn from it, and I'm not going to make that mistake again. Simple as that. All we can do is the best we can do. Most of the diag guys I know especially, we hold ourselves to a very high standard. We have to. We're where the buck stops. If something goes wrong in the shop, especially if you're a foreman, the buck stops with us in the shop. Quality going out of that shop, I take that personally. I don't care who made the mistake. I care what the mistake was, but I don't care who made the mistake. How did it happen? Why did it happen? What do we need to do to make sure it doesn't happen again? That is still tech support. You're supporting your technicians. Maybe not the technical support in the aspect of resolving the problem with a mechanical object, but it's fixing another kind of problem. You know, that's what we do. We solve problems, regardless of what they are. Stay humble, guys. And I will see all you guys at ASTA in a couple of weeks. Take care of yourselves.